Hi, in this video we want to see how computers were invented and why. In the last video, we were introduced to abacus, and we saw the first mechanical calculator that could do addition and subtraction. We learned about people that their job title was computer, and we examined the first calculator that could do all four mathematical operations. Now we want to see how these simple calculators evolved into computers that we know today. So these calculators, despite being very successful, had some problems. For example, it took so much for them to do calculations, and even some complex operations would take 24 hours to complete. Because of this, some handbooks were made that complex calculations were written in them. For instance, if you wanted to calculate the square root of 1398, you could look for it in the handbook and find the answer in a few minutes. These books were widely used during World War I because armies needed it in various tasks. Another machine that was a great breakthrough was the difference engine, invented by Charles Babbage. This machine could solve polynomial functions. Polynomial functions are mathematical expressions that show how a thing changes in relation to another thing. For instance, they can tell us if the air pressure is this, how likely is it to rain? Another machine theorized by Charles Babbage was the analytical engine. Charles Babbage couldn't finish this machine in his lifetime, but it was eventually created later, and it was called a general-purpose computer. Up to this point, computers were only designed to do one thing, for instance, mathematical calculations. But these computers could be programmed to do various tasks. Ada Lovelace, one of the Charles Babbage's students, long before the first programmable computer was made, wrote a program for this hypothetical machine, and therefore she's considered the first programmer. Another famous machine was called the bomb, developed by Alan Turing during World War II. The motivation behind this device was to decrypt Nazis' messages, and was a great help for UK during the war. But did the people or companies use computers as well, or was it just used by the military? To answer that, we need to go back to the 19th century US, where based on the law, the government was required to do a census every 10 years. But in the 1880s, the population of US exploded, and it took 7 years to complete the census. And it was predicted that the next census would take 13 years, making it obsolete. This inspired young Herman Hollerith to work on a device that could read data on a punch card, and therefore automating the census process to a degree that the next census took only 2 years to complete. After that, more companies started using computers and machines, and later on Herman Hollerith's efforts created International Business Machines Company, or IBM. IBM played a significant role in development of computers. In the 1940s, during the Second World War, this company created Harvard Mark I, a supermassive computer that was made using electromechanical relays. These relays kind of worked like a switch that could turn on or off and control the flow of electricity. For its time, it was a great computer and had great stats, but it had some problems. For instance, the speed wasn't quite good enough, and also these mechanical relays produced so much heat that they would attract bugs. And one of these bugs actually got caught in the computer, causing errors. And after that, the word bug is used to describe an error in software. Because of this, scientists were working on substitutes of relays, and one of the successful ones were vacuum tubes. The tubes were also pretty similar to a switch and could turn the flow of electricity on or off. They weren't perfect, but they were a great improvement because they were electronic as opposed to being electromechanic, meaning no moving parts. But they also had some problems, like being made out of glass and being fragile, occupying too much space, and so on. So that wasn't the end. The final breakthrough was transistors. Developed by William Shockley, John Bardeen, and Walter Brattain, transistors were made out of silicon and therefore completely solid. They could be made as tiny as possible, and they were really fast. They could switch between on and off 10,000 times per second, and that number has gone up to more than 3 billion now. One of the first computers made by transistors was IBM 608. Back then, William Shockley also created a company at Santa Clara, California, that was working on transistors and semiconductors. Later on, Shockley's partners created another company there called Intel that grew to be one of the largest companies we've known. And because of that, Santa Clara became famous as the Silicon Valley, which now most tech giants like Google, Apple, and X are located on. In the last two videos, we discussed the history of computers and got a deeper understanding of it. Now in the next videos, we will dive into the components and the hardware of a computer and learn more about them. So subscribe to the channel to don't miss out on those videos.